Hello and welcome to the MMQB NFL podcast. I'm Gary Gramling.
I'm Conor Orr.
And Conor, we have the Super Bowl coming up in, a week. The Rams are the favorites in this game, and rightfully so. I think everyone understands why the Los Angeles Rams should be Super Bowl 56 champions in all likelihood. However, we're going to spend the top of this show kind of telling you why they won't win this game, why maybe the Rams suck after all. Maybe they're the worst team in football when it's all said and done. I don't think so.
Yeah, you transient Hollywood types just checking in, pretending you loved football the whole year. Get out of here with your clown franchise. You're not going to win this Super Bowl.
I didn't see you guys before Robert Woods tore his ACL.
Mm-hmm. There's no, I don't think anyone that's just a collector of vibes or judger of vibes, you can't deny the Bengals right now. Like 90% of the country is just absolutely on fire for this team. And they've got a Loyola Chicago kind of vibe right now, which is almost impossible to cultivate in the NFL. But for some reason, everything that was perpetually unlikable about this team for decades is now all of a sudden cute and fun. And that's what happens. And, Joe Burrow MVP.
It's, I don't know. You can only ride vibes so far, I feel like. Although we're now in a one-game scenario. And look, if you're talking broadly about the NFL, whatever. We saw the Texans beat the Titans this year. We saw the Jaguars beat the Bills. Things happen. We're not gonna suggest this is a potential upset of that magnitude should the Bengals win this game, but objectively speaking, they are probably the second best team participating in the Super Bowl next week. But let's run down sort of the Rams' weaknesses to start here, and I want to start on the defensive side of the ball because we know how good Aaron Donald is. We know how good that front four is with Greg Gaines had a breakout year, and then obviously you have Von Miller and Leonard Floyd on the edges. They've had games this year where they just didn't really tackle very well. And you saw it pop up. Troy Reader missed a couple of tackles on that 49ers last touchdown drive in the NFC title game. You've seen it come up, and I feel like if you go back, frankly, if you go back to when the Jets upset the Bengals, that was the case of a day when a defense that usually tackles pretty well just didn't tackle. And now we have a Rams team that they have a handful of games where they just didn't tackle very well.
Yeah, it's weird, right? When you have a season where 13 of your games, and this is including the playoffs, you've allowed fewer than 100 rushing yards. But that said, games like the Colts game, both of the 49ers games, the Ravens game, which they won earlier in the year, and the Cardinals game where they just got bowled over earlier in the year, they just stand out. And, maybe it's because we don't think of someone like Aaron Donald leading to a bad running defense. But as we've talked about in this show before, I just think that there are some things schematically that, they can use the Rams' strength against them. We've seen this when Von Miller and Bradley Chubb were together in Denver, where a lot of teams would invite them up the field and then run into the gaps that they created with that kind of upfield surge. When Aaron Donald was playing the 49ers, he would find himself just fighting back a lot of down blocks, which are really easy things for offensive linemen to make, and the 49ers make sure it happens that way schematically. With the Bengals, it's going to be interesting, right? Because they can do the traditional outside zone stuff. They mix in a lot of inside zone, too. And so I think that they're not, like any team, is not specifically one kind of school, but I think that Zach Taylor, if you have Joe Mixon, if you have the threat of Burrow just hanging back there and being kind of like a young, thin Ben Roethlisberger and just slinging the rock fearlessly, then you have to respect that and you have to lighten the box. And so, lo and behold, you're going to, if you're Zach Taylor, you probably like the odds a little bit. Joe Mixon's a bigger guy. I think they're going to try to ride him a little bit.
We saw a couple times that Chiefs game. Look, we'll get to that right side of the Bengals offensive line. It is maligned, and it's maligned for a reason here. They just haven't done very well this season. there were times where they got Mixon behind that side of the line and had some success in the Chiefs game. I'm stealing someone's line on Twitter, and I'm very sorry for that, but someone pointed out, like, their screen game is kind of effective to that side. You can't really tell if you're a defensive lineman if you are getting upfield really easily because of a screen play or just a regular play, because you get upfield pretty easily on any play. But they've had some success doing some things to that side. I mean, pass protection is an issue, but they can still have some semblance of balance here if they can get the run game going a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they went through a lot of effort, I think, in Kansas City to establish that as sort of a tone setter. They used Jamar Chase as that backfield satellite to kind of try to not only gauge the coverage and figure out what the Chiefs are doing defensively, but to peel guys out of the box and see if they could get more defenders out of the box and lighten the load a little bit for Mixon. So I think Zach Taylor's just kind of been experimenting with stuff like that. And if you're Sean McVay, I think what's interesting about this, and it's interesting anytime you play somebody that's coached for you, is that they kind of understand the breadth of you and what you're trying to accomplish. And what's interesting about Taylor is, there's so many influences on that scheme that I just think, I'm not saying Sean McVay and Raheem Morris can't figure this out. And I'm not saying that Sean McVay and Raheem Morris don't have depth to their scheme, but it's like, what if Zach Taylor goes, I was talking to somebody today about this. Like, there's a lot of this 2015 Dolphins stuff, like, Gary Kubiak Broncos sort of an offense that they can just sort of call upon at any time and sort of start running that. I mean, he's got a lot of weird stuff in his back pocket that, and this is the time to see it in the Super Bowl. This is when you want to show it. But I think he probably knows a little bit more about what McVay's going to try to do versus McVay trying to guess what Taylor's going to do, because they have very diverse coaching backgrounds, and I think that you could probably present something a little bit broader and more unique in the run game there.
Well, let's go to the other side of the ball and again discuss why the Rams are simply just a terrible football team that are lucky to be in this position. This offensive line, and you saw it. Frankly, you saw it in the last two meetings with the 49ers, maybe not as much in the victory over the Bucs and over the Cardinals, so you can tell how much we're sort of grasping for straws here. But the offensive line has had pass protection issues. I mean, they even when the 49ers only sent 4 last week, and yes, there's Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa made some noise, but like Samson Ebukam put Andrew Whitworth into Matthew Stafford's lap on a handful of snaps last week. So if you're looking at this Browns defense and you have Trey Hendrickson, who's been a really disruptive pass rusher for this year, you just kind of wonder if you can get that sort of superhuman Giants Super Bowl 42 type of performance out of your pass rush and just you end up taking the game over that way, or at the very least just making this a really uncomfortable one possession game at the end of it.
Here's what's interesting to me, and I learned this. I have a story coming out about this at some point. Gary, you would know when the story is coming out. I don't know. I don't control this. But the Bengals, in a lot of ways, like the defense, outside of Jesse Bates and maybe Trey Hendrickson, seems underwhelming at first glance, right? Like, it's just like, okay, Eli Apple, Chidobe Awuzie, is this what your Super Bowl defense looks like? But I think what I found that's kind of interesting is like how much more say, and the 49ers are like this too, to a lesser degree, but how much more say the coaches have in terms of dictating personnel. And in that way, everything is streamlined to a specificity. And so if your defensive coordinator is like, for him, Trey Hendrickson is infinitely more valuable. Well, I'm not going to say infinitely more valuable, but probably more valuable to him specifically than, say, I don't know, name your X-star pass rusher, right, in the league. That's just, And so a lot of the stuff that they do is very unique to the players that they could, A, afford, and B, that they wanted to bring in this offseason. So a lot of times when I look at it and I say, okay, well, can Trey Hendrickson really, win a matchup like this consistently? But then I kind of remind myself, like we've been kind of trying to tell ourselves all along, it doesn't really matter because they're all playing a part in, this is one of the true unit defenses in the NFL. There's not a lot of individual star power there. There's almost no freelancing on this defense, so you know what you're going to get on every down. And so I think that's interesting, where it's like, yes, there are some individual matchups that will have to be won there, but they're all like, kind of flowing in unison. Whereas like I think a lot of these other defenses, the Rams in particular, have guys who do what they do really well specifically, and the defense is kind of structured to allow them to do that.
Well, they do, and boy, if we could go back to the root of every football take on the show, and that is the Cleveland Browns this summer, I think that team is a year away, not because they're poorly coached or anything like that. I just think when you're talking about the back seven, it just takes a little while for all that to gel, and I think what you're seeing is kind of the end product of a process here for the Bengals, and you could see it a little bit late last year. And it's just become a really good, cohesive group. It's a physical group. It's just, again, I feel like outside of that Jets game, there's really not a time I saw them this year and was kind of like, boy, that was really that was an underachieving kind of day. That was a team that just didn't look very good out there. They've just been solid week in and week out, and I think that's kind of the product of building off that. Even in a year where I don't think Jesse Bates has been quite as good in 2021 as he was in 2020, but even in a year when probably your best guy in that position group has kind of slid back a little bit.
Yeah, it really is incredible. Like if you would have told me that Jesse Bates was not having like his 100% best season and the Bengals were going to win the Super Bowl, I would have made fun of you on this show. Probably quite a lot. But I've had to apologize to a lot of Bengals fans at this point, and some people just kind of saw things that we didn't. I just think across the board, the upgrades that they made were, I think that this was in a lot of ways like what we all made fun of Dave Gettleman for, but it worked. Like Dave Gettleman had a vision for a defense and kept bringing in guys to fit that vision, but just never had a coach that was willing to stick around and coach that vision. And the Bengals just kept acquiring these guys for this specific thing, like whatever that was going to be. And listen, I mean, Reeder and these guys up front, they play the run really well. They're stout. And so I think that helps a lot of things. And they're kind of uncelebrated, kind of like really good hand fighters in the trenches. But a lot of this is just really like awesome, but also unreplicable. Like people were talking about, I think, interviewing the Bengals defensive coordinator for head coaching jobs and why that didn't happen. He only interviewed with the Giants. And I think you need to be in Cincinnati for that to work. You need to have a coaching staff that is in charge of personnel and scouting to have that work. And you have to have the owner's blessing for that. And you can't worry about someone going up to the owner's box and telling on you and then just getting fired. So I think this is a very unique to them moment situation. And yeah, it's awesome. And, I still can't believe it. I mean, I'm still in disbelief. Like every time I watch a game, I'm just like, no way. And then here we are.
Can I give you the stat that I found that I could not believe when I found it, and I might be the only one who wasn't able to believe it, individual player stat here, but Mike Hilton, I love Mike Hilton, and my favorite moment in football is Mike Hilton on a slot blitz. It was my favorite play for 4 years in Pittsburgh, and whatever, he had the big deflection and interception off of it in Nashville, and I was like, oh, what did he have? 4 or 5 sacks this year, something like that. And he didn't have a sack this season. I couldn't believe that. I was shocked. I remain shocked.
Wow. Well, he's saving them all for the Super Bowl.
It's 11 sack day for Mike Hilton. Here we go.
Yeah. I mean, I love it. I love it when stuff like this happens. Like you just kind of get another dimension to a player that you thought you kind of knew everything about. I just think this entire thing is very cool. And it's a lesson to other owners on how you would want to set things up if you could, but nobody's going to pay attention. And they're just going to be like, sign me 5 Bengals players. And then, let's just continue to run this team into the ground.
Well, let's discuss the one flaw with the Bengals, the only flaw with the Bengals, and that's the right side of that offensive line. And look, we kind of saw. The Tennessee game was a big red flag to me as far as this goes, but you didn't quite see them ever really adjust to this. And now you're going into a game where, quite obviously, Raheem Morris is going to take many opportunities to put Aaron Donald and Von Miller together on the right side of the offensive formation and get after Joe Burrow that way, and that seems like a recipe for disaster, obviously. But the way they got around this a lot during the season was Joe Burrow just escaping and just sort of managing the free rushers coming at him, which is, look, it worked. I mean, it's a tightrope walk, but they got through it, and here they are. But I mean, man, it's just. They got to have something. It's going to cost him an eligible receiver. It's going to cost him something. But this is shaping up to be ugly if they're going to try and spread them out, send 5 guys out, and also try and hold off these Rams superstars.
We saw a little bit of Drew Sample, the second tight end, in the backfield, and I kind of liked that. He was also like wide open on that screen pass touchdown right before the half, but they were kind of had some packages in there with him, and so you have a second tight end, but what you're kind of doing is you're bringing him out, which is exactly what I thought Andy Reid should have done last year against the Buccaneers, which is you have him in the backfield, and then you're having your first tight end do what number one tight ends do and getting open in the seam and stuff down the field, but you have that second guy just coming off the ball. A couple plays that I saw was really on the left side where Jonah Williams doesn't need that much help. But on this one, theoretically, you may have him line up on the other side. And all you're doing is like just chipping just a little bit, on your way out into the flat. And then you provide an eligible receiver, a quick eligible receiver for Burrow if he needs to check down. But more than that, you're just slowing the pass rush down a little bit. And we saw that a little bit against Kansas City. I think that was an acknowledgement after what happened in Tennessee of being like, holy crap, we can't do this anymore. But it's funny. Like I texted a coach who I think is really smart and helps kind of dumb things down for me sometimes. And I said, just explain to me the magic behind this Bengals thing, because I'm just not getting it. Like what am I missing here? And he just texts back, really fucking good quarterback. Like, period. That's it. Like, it's not, we're not in the advent of some like schematic breakthrough. It's just like this guy's tough as shit, and he's continued to play tough as shit. And I think at some point, if you're the Bengals, you have to counteract that. And I do think that's probably going to be your thing, right? You're going to have to take Sample out of the backfield. You're going to have to chip guys, especially on that right side. Like when I was down in Nashville, watching Jeffrey Simmons just demolish people was terrifying. Like if you're Joe Burrow, you're just like, no, I'm not signing up for this again.
Jeffrey Simmons, young Aaron Donald, as we call him on this show.
That's right.
All right, so we're going to have more Super Bowl preview type stuff. We'll give our score predictions on the midweek show. I think we're going to have Mitch Golich on and do some prop bet type of things, but we will see how the wind blows during the week and figure that out. But right now, we're going to go around the league. We had 2 more head coach hirings. We will start with Kevin O'Connell. Yeah, we'll do the Super Bowl tie here. Kevin O'Connell, Rams offensive coordinator, will reportedly get the Vikings job. That will become official after Super Bowl Sunday. This is it. I mean, we have another Sean McVay coaching tree. I mean, McVay has been playing down the coaching tree, but number one, there's a lot of them now, and number two, you have one of them playing in the Super Bowl. You have another one of them has won 39 regular season games in 3 years. These guys are working. As much as we like point and laugh, the results have actually been pretty good here.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Kevin O'Connell, I mean, I remember covering him as a backup quarterback for the Jets, and he was drafted by the Patriots in 2008, but he was so smart and like gained such a reputation as this like consummate backup quarterback that I think the Jets traded like a 7th round pick to just have him there, like in the facility, because he was so smart, and just to have him around Mark Sanchez. And so he was always one of those guys that, like, yes, he landed in the Sean McVay tree, and I think that was, inevitably going to take off where it took off. But I think that was going to happen regardless. I mean, he was always on a coaching fast track, and it's hard. Like, this is a difficult time. We did our Brian Flores show last week. I think that there are a lot of really good coaches who have been shut out. I mean, you just talk year after year about guys like Eric Bieniemy, who is part of a great coaching tree that was hired from frequently, and we'll get to Doug Peterson in a minute again. But for some reason, just whatever it is, it's not happening. And so you juxtapose the two of them. But if we want to talk about O'Connell independently, like I just, it's hard to argue. You're right with the success of these guys. I mean, Zach Taylor, did he get a year longer than I think most coaches would have gotten in Cincinnati? Yes, but he also took the job understanding that and knew that he was going to have time, and you get Joe Burrow in there and things start working. But Matt LaFleur, it's just it's hard to argue with right now. If I'm an owner, that's not my single sole determinant of success, but at the same time, it's like, okay, how do you argue with something like this at this point? Like, I hate the idea of saying just because you sit next to someone, you become someone. But like, even to just have the playbook, the way that you set things up offensively, the way that you kind of lull teams into believing you're going to do one thing and then do another, especially with that personnel with, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and Kirk Cousins, like they could contend for the division next year.
Yeah, it's Kevin O'Connell and look, Zach Taylor did not bring Sean McVay's system to the Bengals. That's not what they run. True. I mean, this is so you don't want to just peg them as like, oh yeah, Rams offense is going to Minnesota. Although what the Rams do is broadly similar to what they have wanted to do in Minnesota. Obviously, they've been much more run heavy with Mike Zimmer, but is still built off that play action, make it look like the one thing we always do, and then do something else off of it. And it seems like it would be a fairly seamless transition in the short term. And then, I mean, look, that organization under the old regime was sort of itching to find that next guy post Kirk Cousins. Contractually, Cousins is going to be there for the short term, but they went out and drafted Kellen Mond. They reportedly were interested in a trade up for Justin Fields last year, and they would have a situation where basically Fields might sit behind Cousins, but the way the contracts would play out, you could probably fit a rookie quarterback behind Cousins on one of those cheap deals. But you kind of wonder, what does this have them looking for as far as like the next step goes there at quarterback? Yeah,
if I'm Cousins, I'm probably thrilled. I think that this is going to propel him to the next big contract. I don't think maybe he's not long for Minnesota, but you have an offensive coach like this come in, you're probably going to throw for 4,000 yards and 28 touchdowns, 29 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns, and then move on to Miami or wherever you're going next, and play quarterback and have a good time there. I don't know. Where's a weird place he's going to end up that we don't expect? It's not New Orleans. It's not Miami. Maybe like sneakily like the 49ers, something like that. Falcons.
I could see that. I think the Trey Lance thing is gonna work out.
I do too.
I would throw Atlanta out there. I would throw Tampa out there under whoever their next coach is going to be after Arians. It's interesting though. It's so funny because we reflexively you kind of smirk at the thought of Kirk Cousins getting paid again, but he's sort of again. He got paid in the first place because it was kind of like, boy, there is a clear shortage of quarterbacks. And then he got paid, and it was kind of like, oh, actually, pretty good quarterback supply here. You would never say everyone's locked in and everyone's fully satisfied, but there was no one running out sort of sub. I don't know, sub-baseline type of guys, and we're kind of nearing that again, especially with the rookie quarterbacks this year kind of struggling. If a couple of those guys don't pan out, and you have a few more guys aging out, all of a sudden you're going to reach that point where there are a couple teams looking around being like, I don't know, he's Kirk Cousins, but it'd be kind of nice to have him instead of, what we have.
Yeah, but it would have been nice if Daniel Snyder didn't run him out of town. He would make a wonderful commander.
Well, let's go down to Jacksonville here. Doug Peterson indeed gets his second shot as the retread coaching hire. Gets Trevor Lawrence down there, and I don't know. Again, you referenced the Andy Reid coaching tree. He was a guy who, when he got hired in Philadelphia, everyone was kind of like, I don't know, Doug Peterson. Are we really going to do this? And then he goes out and wins the Super Bowl with the backup quarterback, and things collapsed pretty quickly there. But look, he's a professional. We'll see what he brings in for a staff, but I thought a retread really appealed to me as far as that Jacksonville job goes, because you just want, I don't know, a professional football coach in there after what you just went through over the last year.
You know what we need right now, and God rest in peace, Norm Macdonald, but like, I can never replicate his delivery, but like I could view like a Weekend Update scenario where it was like, you know what Shad Khan wanted out of his head coach? Someone not to kick the players, But that's like a horrible.
That was decent, but it was. It's none of them are good, but that was okay.
It's like it's like the cadence, like, and it's just like that face that he makes when he does it, I think was like really funny. But I mean, that's what you need. You need a guy that's going to be like, like Shad Khan's going to be like, okay, all right, last year got a little weird. Like, do you have an NFL offense? Yes. Like, okay, all right, good. Are you going to practice the things that like most other teams practice? Yes. Are you going to kick the players? No. You sneak that in third just to try to trick him, make sure he's paying attention. And then,
yes, wait, no.
Damn it. Yeah, I mean, this will be fine. It looks like reportedly Press Taylor is going to go down there, Zach's brother, and be the offensive coordinator. He was with Doug Peterson in Philadelphia, and I think did a good job there. And I think where it fell apart in Philadelphia, like everybody's like, oh, Doug Peterson's bad coach, terrible coach, and all this stuff. It was all Frank Reich. It was a lot of Frank Reich, right? And we saw Frank Reich and how well he's been doing in Indianapolis, but a lot of what happened in Philly was like, I mean, ownership gets involved there. And so all of a sudden they're like, well, we would like our offense to look more like this, and we would like you to do less of that. And so they start kind of bringing in people that don't work there, and everyone shouts at each other at these meetings, and nothing is getting done, And so I think, he probably learned a little bit about personnel management from that side. I think probably Shad Khan is not going to be in his way in terms of, dictating who he brings in and stuff like that. He'll have a free reign. I mean, even at his worst, he wasn't horrible. When things started going off the rails, it wasn't, the Jaguars or, it wasn't bad. So I think it's a good hire. I think it's steady. Puts him back in the division with Reich. So it'll be fun to see them go toe to toe twice a year. And I don't know. I thought it was a good hire. I thought they had a good, too? And I'm curious your take on this. I know it. Fan Nation, which is our kind of SI subsidiary, we have John Shipley, who does an amazing job covering the Jaguars for SI, and he was on really kind of hot on this idea of optics, right? And this being a bad search from an optical perspective, and I think I could see it that way, right? When Byron Leftwich pulls out, you immediately then hire Doug Peterson, and who knows how that worked, right? Maybe Byron Leftwich pulled out once he knew Doug Peterson was getting the job, or vice versa. But his take on it was that the length of the search was troubling from an optical perspective. I think you could probably argue it both ways. I don't disagree with John, because I think John's really smart and knows that team really well. But at the same point, like, I didn't hate them bringing in like Rich Bisaccia and Vic Fangio and like all these guys and just collecting information at that point, because he probably felt that the rhythm of the hiring cycle, it was such a slog. Nobody was making any moves anyway. You kind of figured that nobody was hot on Doug Peterson anyway. And so it's like, okay, well, let's just keep him here and then figure out what the deal is with all these other guys. I mean, I thought it was okay. And if you're the Cons, you probably needed to sit there and just listen to a bunch of like hardened football types after the Meyer thing. Like,
yeah,
it would have been good. It would have been good to sit in an interview with Vic Fangio and be like, even if you don't come, who the hell should we hire? Or, Rich Bisaccia, and be like, what are we looking for in a guy that's going to like not kick the players,
No, it's the reason I didn't mind the length. I never mind the length. The only time it becomes an issue is if you lose your guy, and it didn't seem like they lost their guy. I mean, if Byron Leftwich was indeed their choice, and he didn't want to come again because Doug Peterson had sort of come to the forefront, or whether it was an issue with Trent Baalke being retained or whatever it might be, they didn't lose him because they waited too long. I feel like the shame of it is, this time last year, I think there was an optimism with this franchise where it was like, oh, okay, Trevor Lawrence is here. We got this, this championship winning coach out of college, and he's a program builder, is what I have read about him. He builds programs, and that's his thing that he does. And I feel like there was kind of an ambition with that organization that just hasn't always been there. Whereas I feel like now they're kind of at a point where it's like, all right, let's just not be an embarrassment anymore. We can be a 9-8 team a couple of years from now, and then we'll all be perfectly satisfied with it.
It's just like, please God, 9-8, just or 8-9, like, just like not this, right? And I don't know. I mean, listen, I think that Doug Peterson is going to be we saw him at his worst when he was forced to choose between like people that he respected and players that he respected and something else, like a vision for the future. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, to have a semi-honest person, and just somebody who's going to shoot you straight, a former quarterback who can kind of BS with Trevor Lawrence. And, I've sat in his office with him. I've watched him diagram plays. He's never kicked me. And Gary, has Doug Peterson ever kicked you?
Does he get the Jimmy legs sometimes? Maybe there will be a misunderstanding. I don't know.
Yeah, me and former boss Peter King went down there after the Super Bowl in 2018. And I do have to say, so I'm a little bit biased here, but he diagrammed their game-winning play from the Super Bowl win over the Patriots. And if he can replicate that setup offensively, now granted, you're not going to have Frank Reich, and some of these guys that they're just going to be hard to get, but Press Taylor, and if you can bring back some of the guys, like how he had it divvied up, and everything was very like selfless, and you do this, you do this, you do this, and then we all sit in a room together and we come up with this stuff. I thought it was interesting. I think it can work out. You have Trevor Lawrence as a part of that. You make him feel empowered, and I don't know. Maybe your promise of the Jaguars being a borderline playoff team last year, Gary, comes to fruition just a year late, which is familiar to some of us in the Oracle business. It happens.
That was off the record. That never happened. All right, Connor. When we do the midweek show, you are going to be in Los Angeles.
Possibly.
Hopefully.
We're gonna try. You're going to be apprised of this at some point, but I'm going to try a little bit of a one-way rental car rigmarole flight out of the Midwest to LA kind of deal. And so we'll see. I mean, maybe I'll be doing this at an airport in Denver. Maybe I'll be doing this in a roadside hotel in Nebraska. I don't know. I might have to drive to the Super Bowl. I'm not 100% sure what's happening yet.
I go. We could do a little "Where is Connor" type of deal with this. The mystery will reveal at the end of the midweek show.
Yeah.
It'll probably be Los Angeles, though. We'll
probably be Los Angeles.
We'll probably wait for you to get there.
That'd be good.
The MMQB NFL podcast is Connor Orr and me, Gary Gramling. We are produced by Shelby Royston. SI's executive producer of podcasts is Scott Brody, and our senior podcast producer is Dan Bloom. Mark Mravik is emeritus editor of the MMQB, and Andy Benoit is the founder of the MMQB NFL podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this feed on Apple Podcasts, and once you do, please leave a rating and review because it really does help other people find the show, which is also available on Spotify, Stitcher, SI.com, and wherever else you listen to podcasts.